Welcome back, guys. This is Dr. Chris Erskine, and today we're going to talk about America moves to the city. People are coming into the United States, and immigration is increasing. And what do Americans do? And so we're going to talk about a couple of threads in this lesson. And in part one, we're going to talk about what we say in English is urbanization. And if you look at this first slide, you'll see that the title of this first slide is called urbanization. Now, what is urbanization? That's an important question. So first of all, you need to understand what an urban environment is, or what does the word urban mean? It means city, or having to do with the city, something about the city. The opposite of urban is rural. That means in the countryside, or not in the city. We also have in English the word suburban, which means you live in a neighborhood just outside the city, but still with lots of people, not the farmland. And I live in the suburban. Most of you, I think, probably live in the urban area, although some of you might live in more rural areas. So today we're going to talk about, in this lesson, urbanization and kind of the growth of the United States and growth of cities. And so Americans now view around, by after the Civil War, Americans now view the city as the land of opportunity. There's jobs in the city, and so they begin to move to the city. But there are some barriers or walls to social movement. Whites could move. Of course, blacks, they're not slaves anymore, but it's not as easy for them to move because people are still racist. We don't have slavery, but people are still racist. One of the famous musicians of the day, his name was Scott Joplin, and he played ragtime music. And so what he created, what becomes known as ragtime music. A lot of piano, a lot of pieces on the piano, and we're going to listen to a clip of that right now. So listen to this clip and then come back. isn't that great? That piece is called The Entertainer, and it's very famous in American music history. But Scott Joplin and other black musicians like him, they had a difficult time moving from place to place. And so what you find is music in the United States develops in places like Tennessee, in New Orleans, Louisiana, in Kansas City. You're going to see music centers for African Americans that develop in the South. The South is also, and the United States as a whole, particularly in the North, is industrial. We become much more urbanized. The city, we have more people in the city than we have not in the city. And for the first time for many people, they can move from one place to another, not just pick up the family and move from Tennessee to California or to Texas, but from one kind of job to another kind of job. So you can start at the bottom and move your way all the way to the top. So we also have working class that develops, and we have social clubs. So people might go to a pub and hang out with a group of people that like to read books, or a group of people that like to go for hikes. Now, those are examples that we would have today. But in their day, they would go to dance halls. They would go to an amusement park with a roller coaster, which you've also been to. They would also go to a saloon, which is a place where you drink alcohol. And the middle class tried to capitalize on these barriers to social movements, meaning that if I can do good in an Indian or an Asian or a Chinese or a Black American cannot do good, then I'm going to make sure that I can rise as high as I can go and take advantage of that. And they also helped to keep African Americans from rising up socially as well. Now look at this next slide. We see population. Just look in the year 1880. In New York City, we see 1.2 million people. In Chicago, 503 million people. In Boston, 363,000. San Francisco, 234, should be 1,000. New Orleans, 216,000. But look at the opposite side. From 1880 to 1900, New York City more than doubles its population. Chicago more than triples. Boston almost doubles. San Francisco by about 50%. And New Orleans by maybe 20, 30, 40%. So these cities are growing very quickly. And in the next slide, we see population growth not in terms of people, but in terms of states in the United States. In 1870, we have 40 million people in 37 states. And by 1900, we have 76 million people in 45 states. So the United States population has almost doubled from 1870 to 1900. So it's growing very fast. Now, if you look at the next slide, what we can see here, and you might want to pause the video if you need to so you can see closely what we're looking at here on this map. But what we have here is a population of people. And I want you to look at this closely. And I want you to think about what we're looking at here. And so what are we looking at? Well, we're looking at the distribution of the population of the United States in 1900. And so in 1900, you can see about, if you're looking at this map still, we see that about halfway across the United States, there's just not very many people. Where it's darker, there's more people. Where it's lighter, there's fewer people. Now look at the next slide. This is the density of the Black population in the United States. And so that population is in the southeastern part of the United States. And once you move to the northeast or to the the northwest, and particularly the far west, you just don't have very many African Americans. Now look at the next slide. This is the population of foreign-born people in the United States. And so you can see, if we go back and look at the previous slide, where most of the people are, what we're looking at here is African Americans are the native-born population in the United States. And the non-native born, the people today that we would call immigrants, are living in places where there's not very many African Americans. So the African Americans have been here for a long, a long time in the South. Then look at the next slide. The next slide we're looking at is roads, and this is in the year 1890. And we have seen this slide in another lesson. I think the last lesson we might have looked at this particular slide and of the road maps. And so if you remember from the slide 3 or 4 slides back, the population continues to move to the west and then suddenly it just quits. Well, part of that reason is because there's no more roads, but also it's slowly creeping further and further west. And if you remember that phrase, manifest destiny, this applies here. We continue to push west, more people, more roads. Immigration in the United States. Look at the next slide. This is a new opportunity. So people were coming from everywhere in the world to come to the United States. They wanted land. They believed in freedom and equality and these American values where you could start with nothing and accumulate and become rich. And everyone in every country has that same idea. But in America, there was so much land that was all you have to do is go and take it. And you can start a company, you can start a business, and you become wealthy and successful and rich. And so many people were attracted to this idea. And so new opportunities in the United States. But at home, there was overpopulation, too many people, crop failure, meaning they would grow food, but the land could not support the food. There was famine, not enough food. There was religious persecution. They would send you to prison or kill you for what you believed about going to church. And there was economic depression, meaning the stock market was not good and business was not good. And so they wanted to migrate to the United States. And if we look at the next slide, we see a picture of Immigration Hall on Ellis Island. And this is something in American culture, in American history, that's very famous. And the next slide, we see a picture of the same place from the air. And so when there were many ports where immigrants would come into the United States, and this is only one of them, but many Americans came in through Ellis Island in New York. And they came through here, they had to get an inspection, a physical inspection. They had to answer questions about their health and answer questions about how much money they had, just like you would have to answer today if you came to the United States through the airport. And then they would either be let in or sent back home. And about 2 or 3% were sent back to their home countries because they were sick or because they were determined to be crazy or the United States government did not feel safe letting them in. But most people just arrived and they came in. And if we look at the next slide, we see a picture of the Statue of Liberty out there in the harbor of New York, between New York and New Jersey. And the next slide, we see immigrants crossing over a bridge on their way to or from Ellis Island. And this next picture is, if you're looking down into the hall inside Immigration Hall, as people line up for their inspections. And the next slide, we can see people getting those inspections. There's government officers that are checking them out, making sure that they are not sick or not obviously sick. And this next slide is a picture of the Statue of Liberty, with which most of you certainly are familiar with. And there's a very famous poem on the Statue of Liberty, and it's called The New Colossus, and it was written by a teenager by the name of Emma Lazarus. And as you look at the Statue of Liberty, I want you to think about these words and ask yourself, what do these words mean? And I'm going to read the poem is much longer. I'm just going to read you one verse. Keep, ancient lands, your storied pomp, cries she with silent lips. Give me your tired, your poor, your huddled masses yearning to breathe free, the wretched refuse of your teeming shore. Send these, the homeless, the tempest-tossed to me. I lift my lamp beside the golden door. As you're looking at the Statue of Liberty, think about these words, and let's talk about them a little bit, but keep looking at this picture of the Statue of Liberty. And so it's the Statue of Liberty talking, looking out across the ocean to these European countries or countries in South America or countries in Asia or wherever. And it's saying, old countries, because America is new, old countries, keep your royalty, keep your emperors, keep your money, says the Statue of Liberty silently as she holds her arm up with the lamp. She says, give me your tired. Give me those people that have no money. Give me your poor, huddled masses who are begging to be free. The wretched garbage of your lands, give these to me, the people that don't have homes, the people that have no money. I lift my lamp to them beside the golden door. The golden door being, of course, the United States of America. Very famous poem, and this is called the New Colossus. And you can feel free to look this up and read the entire poem. Very beautiful poem. And it represents what America is today. And there are periods in American history where Americans we kind of ebb and flow. So sometimes we embrace these words and we take these words and say that they are American. And sometimes we say, we don't want immigrants. We don't want those people to come to the United States. And these periods are called nativist movements. And every country has them. Every country goes through a time in its history where they reject people from the outside. China did it for a long time. Japan did it for a long time. The United States also sometimes does this. Of course, the United States has only 250 years of history. China has 5,000 years of history, and so many other countries have thousands of years of history. But every country looks at outsiders differently, and the United States was no exception here. And so this is going into the 1870s and 1880s. And so we're going to talk more about expansion and urbanization, immigration in the next lesson. We'll see you guys then. Bye-bye.